The wind screamed through the pines, rattling the tin roof of the Snowpeak Rescue Shelter. Nestled in a remote Alaskan valley, the shelter was a cluster of weathered buildings, half buried in snow. Inside the kennels, dogs barked and whined, their breath clouding in the frigid air. The staff moved quickly, hauling blankets and checking heaters, but the cold seeped into everything: wood, metal, bones. At the far end of the kennel row, in a chain-link pen marked "Caution," Koda lay curled in a tight ball. His ice-blue eyes stared at nothing. His thick gray and white fur matted with neglect. Found chained behind a collapsed cabin, the 9-year-old Alaskan Malamute was a ghost of a dog, starving, scarred, and snarling. He'd bitten a handler's hand last week, deep enough to draw blood. Now no one went near him. At night, his howls pierced the shelter, long and mournful, like he was calling for something lost forever. Frank Ellison shuffled into the shelter, snow dusting his gray parka. At 72, he was all sinew and silence. His face etched with lines from decades of climbing mountains and, more recently, grief. His wife Clara had died 6 months ago. Cancer, quick and cruel. Their cabin, once warm with her laughter, was now a hollow shell. Frank volunteered at Snowpeak to escape the quiet, to fill the hours that stretched too long. He wasn't much for talking, but he hauled feed bags, cleaned kennels, and fixed leaky pipes without complaint. The staff liked him, though they worried about the way he stared into the distance, like he was searching for something he'd never find. Koda's howl had haunted Frank from his first day. It wasn't just noise, it was pain, raw and familiar. He'd pass the kennel, see those blue eyes cutting through the dim, and feel a tug in his chest. The staff warned him to stay clear. "He's not right, Frank," said Jenna, the head handler, her voice tight. "We're out of options. If he doesn't come around soon." She didn't finish, but Frank knew. Euthanasia loomed like the shadow of a storm. One evening, after stacking hay bales, Frank lingered by Koda's kennel. The Malamute was silent for once, his massive head resting on his paws. Frank pulled a battered journal from his pocket, one of Clara's old hiking logs, filled with her neat handwriting and sketches of peaks they'd climbed together. He sat on a crate, a safe distance away, and read aloud in a low, steady voice. August 92, Denali. Clear skies, but the wind nearly blew us off the ridge. Koda's ears twitched. His eyes flicked toward Frank, then away. Frank kept reading, his words mingling with the wind. When he left, Koda didn't howl that night. The staff noticed. Frank came back the next evening and the next. He'd sit, read, and watch Koda from the corner of his eye. The dog stayed in his corner, but his posture softened, less coiled, less ready to lunge. On the 4th night, Koda inched closer, his belly brushing the concrete. Frank didn't move, didn't look up, just kept reading about a sunrise over McKinley. When he stood to leave, Koda's eyes followed him, not with a snarl, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. Oh. Days turned into weeks. Frank brought jerky, tearing it into small pieces. He'd toss one through the bars, not expecting much. Koda ignored it at first, but hunger won out. One morning he sniffed the meat, then ate it. His eyes locked on Frank. The next day, Frank held the jerky in his hand, palm open, just inside the bars. Koda froze, hackles up, but didn't growl. Slowly, he stretched his neck, lips brushing Frank's fingers, and took the meat. Frank's heart thudded, but he kept still, his voice soft. "Good boy, Koda. That's it." Jenna, watching from the doorway, whispered to another handler, "I'll be damned." The breakthrough came on a bitter morning. snow falling in heavy sheets. Frank arrived early, his boots crunching on the path. Koda was at the kennel door, not curled in his corner. Frank hesitated, then unlatched the gate. The staff had given him the okay to try, though they hovered nearby, ready to intervene. He opened the door, slow and deliberate. Koda didn't move, didn't growl. Frank stepped back, giving space. Koda took one step out, then another, his paws leaving prints in the fresh snow. He stood there, head low, eyes on Frank. Then, in a moment that stopped Frank's breath, Koda walked to him and pressed his massive head against Frank's knee. Frank knelt, his gloved hand resting on Koda's neck. "Hey boy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You're not so bad, are you?" The shelter buzzed with the news. Koda let him touch him. Jenna told the staff, her eyes wide. Frank, of all people. They'd seen Koda snap at hands, bare his teeth at shadows. Now he followed Frank like a shadow of his own, lying near him during breaks, his tail giving the faintest wag when Frank spoke. Frank changed too. He smiled more, not the tight-lipped nod he used to give, but a real smile, small and unguarded. He started talking to Koda, not just reading about Clara, about the mountains, about the ache in his chest. Koda listened, his head tilted like he understood. The decision came at a staff meeting. Jenna proposed adoption, her voice firm. Frank's the only one Koda trusts. If anyone can give him a home, it's him. The team agreed, some wiping tears. Frank stood in the office, stunned, his hands shaking as he signed the papers. "You sure about this, Frank?" Jenna asked, half smiling. He nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, we need each other." That afternoon, Frank clipped a leash to Koda's collar. The shelter fell silent as they walked out, staff lining the path. Koda's head was high, his steps sure. No trace of the dog who'd snarled and cowered. Frank pushed open the door, and snow swirled around them, bright and relentless. Koda paused, looking back at the kennel, then pressed against Frank's leg. They walked into the storm, two figures fading into the white. At Frank's cabin, the fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. Koda explored, sniffing Clara's old armchair, the rug, the stack of hiking books. Finally, he curled up by the fireplace, his bulk taking up half the hearth. Frank sat in his chair, watching the flames dance in Koda's eyes. The cabin wasn't silent anymore, not with Koda's soft breaths, the occasional thump of his tail. Frank leaned forward, his hand resting on Koda's head. "We're not alone anymore, boy," he whispered. Koda sighed, a deep, contented sound, and closed his eyes. Outside, the wind howled, but inside it was warm and it was home.